All right, well, let's get started. Some other folks may jump in. I would like to thank everyone who came tonight, parents and guardians of the classes of 2027 and 2028. Hard to believe those class numbers already, but we're glad to have you here and glad to be able to have a chance to present some information, give you some general things that both students and parents can be thinking about in the freshman and sophomore years. And then we'll certainly have enough time at the end of the presentation for you to ask some questions. So we'll get right into it. First of all, we have four full-time counselors on the staff who will introduce themselves. I will go last as I'll lead into the next few slides. So Emily?
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for taking the time to be with us. As Brian said, my name is Emily Roller, and I am the Director of College Counseling here at Cushing. This is my 24th year at Cushing, my 16th in college counseling. In addition to college counseling, I work with girls varsity basketball. I live in one of our upper class female identifying dorms and serve on a couple of other auxiliary committees at school, cum laude, as well as something called the A-Team. But happy to have you all here and look forward to working with you more closely in the future.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Fatorik. I'm in my 7th year at Cushing and my 18th year in prep school. In addition to college counseling, I teach AP psychology, coach girls ice hockey and softball, and I live in Lee House as well, the upperclassmen dorm that Emily was referencing. Excited to be here.
Brian, do you want to go or you want me to go?
No, go ahead, Dan, because I'll lead right into the next slide.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Monahan, Associate Director of College Counseling. This is my third full year at Cushing, 5th year living on campus, and 26th year in college admissions and college counseling. Been doing this a long time. Love this job. I think we have the best job on campus and in secondary education. Love working with our students and helping them choose the right fit for them as they go through their college search. In addition to my role in college counseling, I am the dorm head for Low Hall on campus. We're the unique in that we're the only dorm on campus with freshmen through seniors in our dorm, which is kind of interesting. So we've got them all. And I also coach track, and you'll hear more about my other role later. I oversee all of our standardized testing and test prep programs here at Cushing.
And I'm Brian Jurek, 9th year at Cushing, 30-something in boarding schools. Been at it in a number of different capacities at schools and love it. Still living in a dorm with my wife, Janine, who's the chair of the Fine Arts Department here at Cushing. In addition to college counseling, I help coach the girls varsity hockey team. And in the spring, I coach the JV baseball team. We live in Price Dorm here on campus, which is generally a dorm for freshmen, sophomore and junior boys. Yeah, let's move right into the presentation yeah. All right. So we're going to start focusing on the students, and as we go through the presentation, we'll move to suggestions for what parents can be thinking about and doing. But from a broad perspective, right? The first thing that is going to be important is that students think about their academic program. Always, always, always in the college process, an application reader, the first thing they're going to grab out of file is the transcript or transcripts if a student hasn't been at Cushing for 4 years. And what they're generally looking for is what kind of program is the student taking? At Cushing specifically, we recommend in the college office that students take 5 courses in what we call the academic cores: English, math, science, social sciences, and languages. Sometimes for different reasons, there are waivers or exceptions to those, but generally we recommend 5 academic core program over the 4 years at Cushing. The second thing that admissions folks will look at is the rigor, the challenge of the student's program. This is not to say that, every student should take as many honors or AP level courses that the school offers. What we think about when we think about academic rigor is is that sweet spot for any given individual student of challenge. Are they, if a student is taking all regular courses and getting A's, then probably a good idea to think to challenge themselves with, honors or AP level courses. But if that rigor, 5 core courses at the regular level is challenging for a student, then that's appropriate. We don't want to over challenge or under challenge. So we try to find that sweet spot where a student can be successful while they're challenging and pushing themselves a little bit. So academics is kind of the first thing. What courses are they taking? They're currently 9th and 10th graders. What courses can they look to take in the next year or years? And it's not a bad idea to sort of map out, even if it doesn't come to fruition, but to map out a multi-year plan, an academic plan for students. Some courses at the upper levels, if you want to take AP such and such, you're going to need to plan backwards to make sure you hit the prerequisites for that. The second thing that 9th and 10th graders can be thinking about is what they're doing outside of class. And this applies not just to Cushing, but also, during breaks and what they're doing at home. Okay, colleges want to see students who are well-rounded. They want to see students contributing to their communities in a number of different ways. This is very unusual in the world in terms of college admissions. It really is a U.S. focused thing. In most university systems in the world, all they really focus on is the academic record and testing. That's what they focus on. In the United States, it's completely different. They look at the multi-dimensions of a student. They want to see not only what kind of a student they're going to be in the classes, but what kind of contributions they're going to make to the community. And that can be a lot of things. At schools, it can be sports clubs. At home, it can be work, it can be volunteer, it can be internships. There are a lot of things that it can be. But it is an important part. We call it the personal dimension, part of a student's profile. And then the summer, of course, is big. Everyone knows, you all know that your students here are busy. We get up and they eat breakfast and they go to classes, then they're required to do something in the afternoon. They get a break at dinner time. They're back at it, during study hall at nighttime. So there's not a ton of extended free time for pursuing other things. So the summer represents obviously a big chunk of time, and students should really be looking at that with a question of what can I do? How can I use my time in the summer to think about enhancing this personal dimension? Okay, and we'll tell you later, we have a whole guide about with ideas about how to think about the summer.
Can I chime in on one quick thing?
Certainly can, Emily.
Just for folks that might not know what an academic core is, right, where it says that 5 academic cores, that's really English, math, science, history, and foreign language. Not a Cushing perspective, but a college perspective, things like jazz ensemble, things like art, they're not going to count as an academic core class when they're read at the collegiate level. So really a good idea to make sure you're in the 5 academic cores and then layering, right, art on top of that, or private lessons or jazz ensemble. But this idea of an academic core class, that's what they're really referring to. A lot of colleges, when they read a transcript down the line, will actually strip away anything that's not an academic core class. And we'll just look at those cores and really run a GPA just for those cores. And then one other little note on APs, and Dan has the wonderful quote from the USC Dean of Engineering, but something that we see at Cushing sometimes as you move through and you want to think about right now, we have some students that will elect to study for AP exams in classes that we offer without taking the course we offer. And we just want to sort of vocalize now, when you're in the earlier stages, a note of caution on that. If Cushing doesn't offer an AP, write Japanese. We don't teach Japanese, but perhaps your child knows Japanese or has taken it. That's okay. But to take AP Economics, the AP Economics exam, but not the AP Economics class or calculus or psychology or something like that, a little bit of a note of caution. I'll let sort of Dan chime in. We've been to a couple conferences where it's been talked about.
What we have heard directly from the Dean of Admission at USC in engineering, What he has said very clearly is that when students take an exam, but not the course, two things. It's a red flag, first and foremost. It looks like they can, right, great, they can master a test, but do they really know the content? And that's what colleges are trying to determine anyway in admission. Is the student a master of the content that they've taken? If you can take a 3 hour exam and do well on it, great, but that's a 3 hour exam. You may forget that material 2 hours later. So that's the other thing. And then the other piece of it too, quite honestly, is that it looks like students are avoiding teachers at our school. Some AP teachers can be tougher teachers in some certain subject areas. And that's not to say that they're hard classes and kids shouldn't take them, but you want to rise to that challenge. That's what Brian was saying earlier, is you want to rise to the level that's appropriate for your student. That doesn't necessarily mean 5 APs for everybody. It might be 1 AP for one student. It might mean 5 for another student. But you don't want to look like you're avoiding teachers and that you're just able to master that exam versus the content itself.
It also sometimes can put a student off sequence with our own offerings. And you can sometimes run into issues with how many APs are left for them to take, right? If they've already exhausted courses that we actually offer. So just a note.
Sorry about that. I hit the mouse a little too quick.
All right. This is another way of looking at kind of some of the things I've said with a little bit more detail. So what you're seeing in this diagram here is that academic dimension on the left. What's included in that? We talked about the transcript, which is essentially classes and grades, test scores, teacher recommendations, an important part of the academic profile. Students will ask in the junior spring 2 teachers to write on their behalf to really talk about how they are as students. And then, we've been talking about what's the level of passion? How do they show that? The challenge. Okay, are they challenging themselves appropriately? And then we included in every application is something called the school profile. That is a document that simply gives college admissions folks context for reading our applicants. Okay, it gives course lists and it gives information about the class profile. It's just really, I don't want to get in the weeds, but it really is a way that colleges can look at our transcript and put some of the things that we do in context. Probably that, out of millions of experiences out there in high school, some grading systems are different, credits can be different. The school's profile is designed to explain essentially our academic system for college admissions officers. On the right-hand side is the personal dimension we talked about, okay? It's activities, leadership opportunities, character, community service, athletics, artistic achievement, work, all of those things that are outside of the academic realm that happen either at Cushing or at a prior school or in the home community. All of those things are valuable. And then the thing that's in the middle there that makes this H, the counselor letter, that is our letter. We write a recommendation, a counselor recommendation for every one of our students. And we are sort of that bridge to talk about the whole student, right? We talk about the academic dimension, we talk about the personal dimension, and we bring everything together in sort of that overview of who this student is holistically for the college admissions team. Any other thoughts on that, Emily, Dan,
Nope.
Katie?
I was just going to say, I noticed somebody chatted a question and Dan already answered it. Thanks, Dan. Thank you for chatting that. We should have mentioned that. Please, anybody feel free to put questions as they arise as we're going through this. And at the very end, we will do our very best to get through all of them and take additional ones.
Want me to go to the next slide, Brian?
Yep. Next slide, Dan. Thank you. All right. So summertime, obviously a big time, as I said before, a 3-month chunk almost of time to be thinking about what sort of things can a student do to enhance that it could be academic dimension, it could be personal dimension, it can be both. Perhaps it's academic work, perhaps it's work or other sort of things. But we do have in our office, we produced a summer guide, which we have a QR code on the screen there. So if you want to go ahead and pluck that out of the electronic ether, go ahead. It's a great, great, great resource, detailed resource about how to think about the summer. These bullet points on this slide really just hit at the 30,000-foot level of what's in there. You know, what can you do at home? Jobs, internships, family responsibilities can be important for a college to know about. Example, if a student is a primary caregiver for siblings, that's really important. That is part of their personal dimension. Teen Life is a great resource, a big giant clearinghouse for all kinds of opportunities. There are summer academic programs, an infinite number of them. Most colleges and universities have some sort of pre-college program going on. There's online options, for example, through something like Coursera. There can be research opportunities. Okay, there are a lot of programs that offer, an internship or a partnership with professors in research. One thing about that, because it's a particular area where things can get a little dicey with how colleges will view things. Okay, the next bullet, the caveat emptor, all summer opportunities, okay, are not created equal, especially those you have to pay for. Colleges can sometimes be very, very skeptical of programs where access is given really primarily to those who can pay to engage the program. There are tons of good programs out there. You really just kind of have to do your due diligence and frankly ask us if you've come across a program you'd like to say, hey, what do you think of this? Do you think this is a reputable research opportunity, a reputable leadership program that might enhance a student's profile? And then the other thing, of course, is I think this is a message that goes to everything in this process. It can be, and I'm sure you've heard it, it can be stressful, stress-driven, but it doesn't need to be. Okay, kids need to be kids, and in my opinion, as a coach, this kids' lives are so structured as it is. They're structured here at Cushing every day, except for on breaks. So there's got to be time for decompression and for them to just be kids and have some summer fun. So please don't think we're suggesting that you have to now run out and cram your students' summer full of courses and internships and have them working a 40-hour job on top of everything else. Balance, always the best approach.
Yep. The only thing I'd add about jobs is, and obviously not a 40-hour week like Brian just said, but I think sometimes students and families will underestimate the value of a summer job. There's a lot of value in a summer job that I think sometimes just goes unnoticed, particularly for boarding school students when they're not really going to have that opportunity during the school year. For those that are living here, in our academic year, it's a great opportunity. Colleges love to see that, and it can go a long way versus some of these other programs that are out there. But I think most importantly is that last bullet: have fun, be a kid, be a high school kid, go to the beach, go to the mountains, go to the lakes, whatever. That's take advantage of the time you have because we don't give them that much time during the school year. So
one other thing to piggyback on, Dan, you just made me think of it. A lot of times we'll get questions, is one summer opportunity better than the other? Like our college is ranking, right? Like the academic program is higher than the job and the job is higher than shadowing somebody in a profession you might be interested in. No. Right. The student working really hard at Panera or McDonald's is getting the same sort of look and the same sort of respect as a student continuing on with educational enrichment. It's really, what are you doing, right? Versus, are you doing maybe not a lot, right? How are you spending your time and why? That's really what they're looking for. They're not ranking one against the other.
Yep. Now on to everybody's favorite subject, standardized testing. Here is where I think I can say that the four of us stand on standardized testing. They are something that really we believe all students should participate in. Will ultimately every student use a test score? No, absolutely not. And I think that's the first and most important thing. Your son or daughter may not be a great test taker, but we do believe that everybody should take the tests at least once see where they are. And we'd much rather be in a situation where the student has taken a test and isn't using it, doesn't need it, versus getting into senior year and beyond, and then realizing they need a test, never took one, and have to scramble. And then they're probably not taking a test in ideal circumstances. There is a right and a wrong way to take a standardized test, which is why we offer standardized test preparation. We partner with a company called Revolution Prep. You've all received many emails from me about that. They are our official partner, but there are many other programs out there. Just because we work with them doesn't mean that's the only place you can use. There are definitely other great ones out there. We've used other companies in the past. There are free options. There are self-guided options. There are books, whether kids really want to look at the books or not, but there's still great SAT books at Barnes & Noble. You can go pick them up and you can take practice tests right out of those test books. So we really want you to take advantage of it. The best thing about test preparation, which I don't think students sometimes realize, is it's not content mastery in those test preparation courses. It's how to take the test. And that's one of the most important lessons that they can learn in doing some test prep. Each fall, we offer a PSAT or a mock SAT. We offer it to all 10th and 11th graders. 11th grade, so current sophomores right now, your students will have two choices. They can take the PSAT or they can take a practice SAT, but they will do one of the two next fall. Sophomores, rising freshmen who are rising sophomores next year, they could take either one of those. They could also opt into programming with student affairs. Sophomores don't have to take the practice test. I will say this, that there is no harm in taking a PSAT for any student, 10th or 11th grade. The only caveat there is if you are a repeat student, your PSAT score, your last valid PSAT score is in your true 11th grade. So if you're a repeat 10 right now, they're done with their PSAT because they took it this year, hopefully. And we can talk more about that in greater detail. You'll see several emails coming from me when those start coming out next fall, early in the school year. We start a little later next year, or we start on Labor Day. So the test day, the PSAT day, will come up pretty fast in the school year next year. So when should a student start testing? Really, one of the most important things is what math are they in? The SAT is centers heavily on pre-calculus and trig in the math, on the math sections of the SAT. So if the student is not in pre-calc or trig yet, they probably shouldn't be taking the SAT just yet. The ACT doesn't have as much pre-calc and trig in it and has more algebra 2. So algebra 2 is an okay math for them to be in when they're taking their first exam, but really should look and evaluate what math they're in. From an English side preparation, I believe our curriculum at Cushing is going to well prepare any student for success in those sections. But if English is not your first language, if you are an international student, if this is your first year or second year in the United States, you might want to be here for a year or two before you sit down to take your first SAT or ACT, because you definitely want to have that preparation and that behind you. So when should they take the first test? If those math and English courses line up, spring of sophomore year, probably at the earliest if the math is lining up, but more likely than not, it's going to be spring of junior year. Next year, we will have the March SAT on campus. It's the first Saturday of spring break next year. So students will be leaving, but the dorms will still be open at that point, so they can stay through the SAT and take it. We also have a May exam. There's a June exam that we don't offer. There's summer exams, and then, which is great, they've added in this last year a September exam as well. So there's plenty of opportunities going into their senior year ultimately as well. Lots of testing opportunities. They would work with one of the four of us on setting a standardized testing plan as we move forward. So lots to talk about there, obviously, but we don't need to spend all of tonight talking about it. Anybody else want to chime in before I turn it over to Katie? Here you go.
All right. I am up next with kind of just the overview timeline and some things that kids can get started with. So we assign counselors in November of the student's junior year. One of the questions that came into the chat asked about how do you get to know the student, the whole student. I think that is one of the strengths of our office. In November, there's a 2-week period where the student can request a counselor, one of the 4 of us. We don't always guarantee that they'll get matched with that person, but we try and honor that if we can. And then we look at it in a really relationship forward way, trying to make sure that the student and the counselor fit in the best way possible. And maybe that's because you live in a dorm with them. Maybe you coach that student. Maybe you have a shared interest with that student. So we really try and put that relationship at the forefront and try and find the best fit for student to counselor. If your kid does not request somebody, that's okay. That's part of what we're doing with trying to make the final list really work. So that happens in November. The students will know who their counselor is at the end of November, beginning of December. They go away for winter break, and when we come back in January, we have what's called the kickoff night. And the kickoff night gets them started thinking about what they want in the model of the college that they would like. And we carry those group sessions either on Sunday evenings or super Saturdays through from January until spring break. We will have a number of them talking about the less personal side of the process, how to make it, we'll make a Common App with them. We'll talk about what demonstrated interest looks like. We'll talk about how to, about going on visits to campuses. So those things that we can get across in kind of that bulk setting. Throughout that time as well, your student will be meeting one-on-one with their counselor a number of times between winter break and spring break. And that's more of the getting to know you part. For many of us, our first meeting is tell us your life story. Tell us something that sparks your passion. You know, what lights your fire? We have a lot of those kind of conversation starter interactions. And during that time, we also ask students to complete 2 different surveys, a model college survey. So a survey where they talk about what they think they're looking for right now in a college. And then something called the junior survey, where we ask a lot of questions to get to know them. In that time frame as well, we reach out to you all. We reach out to the parents. You guys know your students best, and we get your feedback. What are some of their strengths? What are areas where they might need support? Where do you see your student fitting? Where do you see your role in the process? So that's all in that January to March timeframe. By March break, we are hoping to have gotten to know the student well enough and figured out what they're looking for to create a list of schools for them. We will put that up on our program. Naviance right now is a program that we use that organizes that. And we will send an email to the student and parents saying, hey, we've posted this list, take a look at it. At that point, we try and turn it over to the kid and say, hey, start looking at these schools, whether that means getting to campuses over spring break, whether that means doing virtual tours online. So we flip the process towards them. We hope that when they come back from spring break, they can give us good feedback on a handful of schools and we can start to morph that list. Yes, this stays on. Let's start to move this away. The spring from March to June is also looking at how to complete the application. We make sure that every student leaves understanding how they can get a rough draft of their common application done. And we talk about the essay as well. Dan Monahan and I go into every junior English class and do one session on writing the Common App essay. And then we send them off with a guide for the summer to help them keep moving forward in the process. And the fall is all about tidying up applications, finalizing lists, filing those applications. And then we will work with students all the way through to their deposit, right? We are happy to look at financial aid letters. We're happy to weigh pros and cons once they get their final acceptances. So it really is pretty much a full year and a little bit more process. Dan, can you go to, unless somebody has something to add, can you go to
one other thing? We also do, because just in terms of that question that got asked, we also have them do another survey in the spring called a brag sheet. So some folks might be wondering, like, how do you know all the extracurriculars that my student does? That's the third and last major survey that they will do with us. And we will have them complete it and then review it with them and really get into the nitty gritty of like, exactly what do you do in this club and how many hours and how long have you done this in your summers? So they also do basically, right, they build a resume through a survey for us. And we also have them do a brainstorming doc, and it's pretty interesting to see throughout the course of working with them in the group sessions what they put to all of our brainstorming prompts. And that's also actually another really great way that we get some interesting anecdotes to sort of push and pull on a little bit more and get to know them.
Yeah, one of the things like I led with that relationship is a big part of this process. All four of us also live on campus, so we are seeing your student in the halls, passing through classes. We're seeing them in the dining hall, really working to build that rapport for sure. Can you hit the next one? So the next two slides talk about what students can kind of be noodling, thinking about right now, and then what they can actually be doing to feel like they have a little bit of a hold on the process. So when they start to consider colleges, and they can start thinking about this as early as 9th and 10th grade. Maybe your 9th graders are still adjusting to here, so we can give them a little bit of a breather. But if your 10th grader is ready to start thinking about it, these are some of the characteristics, some of the prompts that they can start to kind of pick their own brains about. You all wound up at Cushing for some reason. You probably looked at some of these bullets while considering boarding school. And many of those are the things that you're going to think about when you're looking at your next stop. Fit is probably the number one thing we talk about in our office. We are not a cookie cutter school where every kid's going to go to the same college and that's going to be the best match for them. That's not how we work. That's not Cushing, and that's what I absolutely love about Cushing. So they can start to think about fit. How do they thrive? How do they reach that potential? What sort of things do they need, supports, interests, otherwise, to get them to what that is? So fit's the first thing. Fun. Brian talked a little bit about this when he was talking about the personal dimension. What's going to make you happy? What's going to make you happy in campus? Yeah, you're going to be going to classes, but there's a whole experience of college. And what are some of those things that you would really like to have? Financial aid, we talk about that from a standpoint of if that's going to be a big consideration for your family, it's important to get ahead on that, right? It's important for maybe you're not having that conversation with your 9th grader, but maybe you're starting to dance into that as a 10th grader, especially if it's going to play a big role in your search. Speaking of those conversations, you all, right? Are there certain guidelines or requirements that you're setting that you want your student to reach? Are there certain things that you think should be included? Are there certain places that the student should not go to school, right? We want to make sure that we can incorporate those conversations. Our job is so much easier when all three parties are aware of the expectation, and know kind of what we're all working towards, right? And can do that together. And then last thing they can be thinking about, who do you want to be? Please don't ask your 9th grader that right now. I think that that's a big picture question. But they can start to break that question down and start to understand, going back to the previous ones, what things make them like feel alive. What do they really feel rewarded when they do? What are their interests? What are their favorite 9th grade classes, right? What are their favorite 10th grade classes? Maybe those start to lead them to that big question of, who do I want to be? That's all I've got for this one. So unless Emma, okay. And what can you do now? So the first 4 bullets, Brian handled pretty well in the early, kind of laying the foundation, talking about classes, talking about summer, talking about getting involved in activities. So I'm going to pick up on that. Think about what they need to be successful. That's a little bit of what I was talking about on that last slide. What is the fit? Where are they going to thrive and grow? So those are things they can start thinking about right now. From a kind of nuts and bolts type thing, Miss Roller, mentioned doing the brag sheet in the process. They can start now keeping track of what they're involved in. It's really funny when you speak with a student and then the next meeting they're like, oh, I forgot as a 9th grader, my National History Day project went all the way to the final. And as if they are starting to find whether it's a Google Doc on their Cushing Gmail Drive where they are listing those activities and any awards that they've won, that's so great for us to have by the time they arrive with us. They can just pull that up and bam, they've already got that for their brag sheet and they've got that for their application. In addition, they can start to keep big papers or projects, things that they have been really proud of. One, for it's a reflection, you can look back and kind of answer that question when we ask you, like, what academic experience has really sparked joy for you. And two, to have, sometimes they're probably not going to want it from 9th or 10th, but some schools will look at essays that students have written in their various classes. So that would be good. And then this last one is a little bit kind of encompassing of all of this, that turning it inward and looking at that self-reflection point, figuring themselves out. And that's a big ask of your young people right now. But hopefully they can start doing some soul searching on that side.
One thing I'll add real quick back to the second to last bullet there. We live in a digital age. Papers are turned in through Google Docs, submitted directly through Blackbaud and MyCushing.
We don't.
Sometimes there's always not a hard copy available, but sometimes you want a hard copy later in the process. If your sons or daughters have a paper, an essay that they're really proud of, they get a really strong grade on it, they get great comments from their teachers. If it was all digital, ask the teacher if they can get a hard copy of that printed at some point so they can save that in their records, because it has come up a couple times, even very recently, with some of our seniors looking for a graded essay as part of their application. So it's perfectly all right, just like we all used to do, our parents used to do for us, and keep those boxes of things and everything that we've done in our high school careers as well.
Lay
So
down.
that we might have them later. So it's something to think
Lay down.
about as you're looking at those too.
Shh.
One thing that I would add on the last bullet point, where I think parents can really be helpful, and it comes around the topic of identity. I think teenagers in general, and certainly at Cushing, right, there are certain things that students come to Cushing for, certain aspects. And I think a lot of times teenagers can tend to identify themselves in a very narrow band, whether that's an athletic band or an artistic band or what, it doesn't matter what band it is. But they're always more. They're always more than just sometimes what they even think of themselves, how they identify themselves. So any kind of encouragement, and early on is to think about the multiple ways that students build identity can be really powerful. It can be very helpful, very powerful to them to sort of broaden their scope
Lay
of
down.
who they think they are.
All right. Dan, can you hit the next slide?
You're on mute, just in case you're trying to, okay. I think Dan's doing some technical work
Oh.
right now.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Dan, you're muted.
Dan, you're still muted. I don't know if you don't want to be heard. Okay, okay. There he is. Perfect. So yeah, I'm going to flip over a little bit to what parents can do now, and our advice will be slightly different for 9th and 10th, but not a ton different. A couple other things just to sort of talk about before we get into some resources. We also will do 2 touch points with your 9th and 10th graders this spring. So just when we sort of look forward again, like how do we already start to get to know folks, or why do we know some of the matches that we make when they're 11th graders? We will visit we'll visit 9th and 10th graders in their connections class, and we also will do a Sunday night programming with them that's about an hour and a half and pretty fun and interactive and extensive. So we will have a couple of actual college counseling touch points with your children, just so you know that that's sort of on the horizon. And before I get into resources, which is really all I'm going to talk about, and I'll be pretty quick, there's some pretty basic resources, but some bigger sort of overarching things that you could start to do now. Again, with 9th graders, it might be a little bit early. Katie's right? They're still just adjusting to Cushing, but probably not too early with 10th graders as we move into spring break and into spring, and they're almost done with 2 years. Starting to have that financial aid conversation, if that's something that needs to happen. Dan is going to talk a little bit about this on our last slide, so I won't get into it too much right now, but starting to have a financial aid conversation just doesn't have to be scary or really long, but just the idea that cost will come into play. We also have a financial aid guide. We're updating it right now. We update it every year. It will be going out in about a week. If you're a 10th grade parent on the call tonight and you know cost will be important, you might want to read through that guide and get a little bit of a sense of some vocabulary and some things you can do right now. The second thing I would say is if you happen to be passing by colleges on March break or in your summers, right? You're driving around an area that has some colleges and you have a little bit of time and you can swing through. Not to wonder, are they going to apply to this exact college? But what do they think of the campus? Was it too big? Was it too small? Did they like it? Did they like that it was mixed with the city? Did they not like the city at all? Right? Starting to just sort of explore campuses if and when you have time is always a great thing that you can do. And I don't even think that's too early for 9th graders in their summer. Again, we wouldn't be worried about specific colleges and acceptance rates or anything like that, but just starting to get onto some campuses so they can feel a little bit what they're like and what they have to offer. So those are sort of a few overarching things. And we just wanted to give everybody some guidebook options if you wanted to start to look at some colleges or to educate yourself about the process. So this first slide, these are just general college guidebooks, meaning you want to look up more about Hobart, right? This isn't teaching you about the process. This is going to say, I want to learn more about Hobart and William Smith College, right? And I actually still like books, and I don't want to do it online. Here are some of our recommendations, the FIS guide, and then the best 392 colleges. Neither one is comprehensive, meaning no, they don't cover all 2,000 four-year colleges, but they cover a huge percentage of schools that Cushing students tend to look at and apply to. They maybe don't have every one, but they have a bunch. And so those are the two that we recommend. We just like how they're laid out. FIS guide, they're about 2 to 3 page summaries, but they give you a pretty good sense of what's going on campus. They highlight the top programs. They highlight what they think makes their school special. So if any of that's interesting, right, you might want to do a little bit more research. So those are general. And then the K&W guide for students with learning differences. If you do have a student that might be looking for academic support in college, we really recommend that you go ahead and purchase this guide. It's excellent. We also have a learning difference guide that the college office puts out. It'll be linked in the counselor corner this week coming up. So if that's something that you might like a little bit more information on now, I would encourage you to check out that guide as well. That's about an 8-pager from our office, but the K&W guide's great. And then Colleges That Change Lives, there is an online, if you didn't want to buy the book, there is an online source now, ctcl.org. These are small liberal arts colleges. So this is niche, but they're really great schools. If you feel like your student would need another Cushing, right, to do well and to thrive and to be happy, this is a book you might want to check out. They are known for their outstanding faculty-student experience. They are known for helping students thrive, for growth from the first year to the last year in college, but they are small liberal arts colleges. So all of these schools are going to be Cushing feeling, 1,500, 2,000, maybe even 1,000 for some of them. And there's about 44 of them. So there is the CTCL site if you don't want the book for that. So those are some general guidebooks. And then Dan, you can go to the next one. These are actually sort of get to know admissions better, right? How do colleges read, or what are some interesting reads just about the college process? We all love in the office that first one, where you go is not who you'll be, right? It's bringing down the pressure a little bit, turn down the dial, right? And showing really if your child goes to just about any place and does a good job, they're gonna be okay. And he's just got a great narrative about it and great examples. So it's actually an older book now, but we still love it. And we still recommend that parents take a look at it and read it. If nothing else, to also remind yourself that your students will feed off of your energy and your stress level, right? And so this is a great book to kind of just put a lot of things in perspective. The second one, the Truth About College Admissions, that's a really nuts to bolts. Let's get yourself educated on the process, right? And it's great. Brennan Bernard is our side of the desk. So he's a college counselor, has been a longtime college counselor. And Rick Clark used to be the Dean of Admissions at Georgia Tech. And now he has moved into a different role there. But both straight shooters, excellent information, wonderful sources. And it really is take you from start all the way to finish. Here's what you need to know about the process. So that's a great one if you're looking to get educated on the process as a whole. How to raise an adult, that's a little bit more tangential, right? It's not going to be specific on the college search, but certainly important as we're trying to help these young folks take control of their lives and be empowered and take those next steps really on their own. So that's another fan favorite in the office. And then the last two will be for some specific groups in particular. But if you are a family counseling a student of color, the Black Families Guide to College Admissions is outstanding. It's the first guide of its kind to come out in about 20 years. I think this is its third year out, and it's a really, really great resource. And then the I'm First Guide to College is focusing on first generation students to college and different things that they may encounter and different resources that may be available for them and different questions that they might want to ask colleges if they are a first generation student. Also will probably, in many cases, first generation also cut over into some socioeconomic groups as well. So those are just some general admissions books that we really like in the office. And then here's a couple blogs and podcasts. Right, I'm a big podcaster now. Just listen to them in my car, listen while I'm doing chores around the house, just can get some great information. So if that's something you enjoy, just 3 simple ones, you'll see the overlap with The Truth About College Admission. The same people that wrote that book actually have a podcast, and Georgia Tech Admissions blog is one of our favorites. And then the Admissions Beat podcast by the Dean of Admissions at Dartmouth. There's plenty of other ones, and you may have already found some of those, and those are great too, but we just wanted to give you a couple if that's something that you wanted to get general information on the process.
Just a little bit more about financial aid in great detail. One of the things you'll hear your sons or daughters talk about now is what's the lore behind somebody, or what's their canon, or some of the terms they use. I don't really understand all of them, but I am the parent of two Cushing, well, one Cushing graduate and one soon to be Cushing graduate. So I just went through this process myself as a parent as well. My oldest worked with Emily in the process, and my youngest is currently working with Katie in his senior year right now. We don't have 3 kids, otherwise Brian would have worked with the third. But one of the things that it's very personal to me. I had a unique financial situation in my own right in my college process. I had a football scholarship, but it didn't cover everything. There was some miscommunication between me and my parents. I ended up taking a whole year off of school because of it. And it was because we just didn't talk about these things. And so while it might not be a topic of conversation for your family now, I hope it is, especially if it's going to be important to your sons and daughters. There are some great resources out there. The third bullet, Paul Martin, he is an excellent, excellent, excellent resource. And we would highly recommend you look into what he has available. If you are Massachusetts residents and or your son or daughter goes to school in Massachusetts, which they all do, MIFA is also a great resource. There are scholarships that MIFA posts and promotes that are specific to locations in Massachusetts. Full-time residents of Ashburnham are classified as rural residents because of where our location is. So those that might live in Ashburnham or Westminster, day students in the area, you're going to be a rural resident. There are going to be scholarships. You're going to be available. You're going to find them through MIFA. So we definitely want you to look into those, especially if financial aid is a big concern for your family. Every college in the country has to have a net price calculator on their website. We will tell you this: if you can find it easy, I can guarantee you that school does a pretty good job with their financial aid. If you have to dig for it, if you have to find it, if you can't find it without searching in the search bar, it's probably a place that's going to maybe struggle with a little bit of financial aid. And if financial aid is a consideration for your family, you definitely want to take that into consideration. There are 2 big categories of financial aid, which obviously you'll get more into as especially a junior, senior year. But the big ones are merit scholarships or need-based aid. Some schools do one, some schools do the other, some schools do both. And so it's important that you look at it. You might not be applying for financial aid, but you might want your son or daughter to be applying for merit scholarships. And that's a big way to discount the tuition at some of these higher priced institutions if they offer merit scholarships. We have a pretty good list of what's updated every year of who gives out merit, who gives out the most merit. And we can certainly share that with you later as part of our financial aid guide that will be coming shortly. So lots to talk about of financial aid. Like I said, I just went through the process right now. Two very different institutions for my two sons, two very different financial aid processes. So I feel like I'm really in the weeds on it right now. So happy to chat about it any more in greater length in later in the process if you have those questions.
And one other note about financial aid, the applications that colleges use to determine your aid are different than the applications that secondary schools use to determine your aid. So we just like to inform parents of that early. Your financial aid package at Cushing may look very different than the financial aid package that you're offered at the collegiate level. And it may not, but it can. And so that's why maybe starting to take a peek at what it might look like now is a good idea. And for folks that are like, what is a net price calculator? Fair, right? So net price calculator, it's going to
describe that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but we didn't think to include that, right? It's going to ask you a few basic financial sort of status questions. So you do need a little bit of financial aid information at the ready, but it's going to walk you through a pretty quick 5 or 10 questions. And then it's going to give you what an estimate for financial aid might be at that college if you were applying next year. And you're not. None of your sons or daughters will be applying next year. And so for sure, there can be changes year to year, particularly if there's changes in your family situation. But at least right now, you could go and play with a few net price calculators to get a sense of what is coming back as saying your ability to pay for college will be, or what is coming back as your level of need, right? That a college could grant you. So it's just getting a little bit of a ballpark.
And one more note on that too. Many schools allow you to save that information they'll either send you as an email or you'll get a auto response right away. If they don't, I would highly recommend you screenshot it and save it however you want to track that, whether it's in your email or creating a spreadsheet, what have you. While none of those numbers are guaranteed financial aid, it's important to hold on to them because ultimately if and when your son or daughter applies to that school in a few years and you get a financial aid package that's vastly different from the net price calculator, you can go back to the school and say, hey, well, here's the information we submitted. You said we were going to pay X, but now you're telling us we've got to pay Y. And those are two very different numbers. A lot of times they can either figure out that unfortunately you made a mistake when you did the net price calculator or things changed, or ideally they made a mistake and they can give you more financial aid. So always save them, particularly if it's a school that becomes one that's going to probably stay on your sons or daughters list moving forward. So good information to have on hand later in the process. So I think that is really wraps the formal part of our presentation. At this point, we are going to turn it over to questions, and I'm going to jump right in with one of the questions that was asked in the chat that we didn't get to answer yet, was on the number of APs a student can take. At Cushing, we don't necessarily cap the number of APs a student can take, but the process starts with the student's current teachers, and all students' current teachers recommend courses for the following year based off of their performance in the classes they're in. And so they may be recommended for APs for the following year. They may not. It's going to be dependent on that. And they will meet with their class dean later this year after spring break to start planning for the next year and selecting courses. I would say that the question kind of started with sophomore year. I would say we typically see sophomores that are AP level students taking 2, maybe 3, junior year taking 3, maybe 4, and then seniors at a real heavy course load, if they're taking a lot, will take 3 or 4 as well. Occasionally you'll see a senior taking 5 or even 6. But I would say that I will tell you that as our AP coordinator, the average Cushing graduate takes 2 AP courses in their time with us. So I'm giving you big numbers, but at the same time, the average student graduating from Cushing has only taken 2 AP courses. So keep that in mind. The numbers above that will then start to differentiate your son or daughter from other applicants when they're above that number. But students also come to us at many different entry points, whether they're coming in as a first-year student or a sophomore or repeating a year coming in. So their curriculum is going to be based off of that entry point with us as well.
There was one other question. I don't know if my response went to that person alone or to everyone, but yes, we will share these slides. We are also recording the presentation. We'll share that as well. So there'll be lots coming out in this week's Counselor Corner to start with on the presentation. At this point, if there are other questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. You could come off mute, I think. Dan, is that possible?
They
for them to
can
come off
unmute
mute?
themselves.
And go ahead and ask us. We'll see if there are any questions and take those. And if not, we can put a wrap on it.
I have a question, if I may ask.
Absolutely.
So I have a friend that maybe is a little bit of an overachiever, and she started visiting colleges like the summer after sophomore year. And that seems early. Is that early? Should we be visiting colleges this summer? I don't even know where to begin. I mean, we live in Massachusetts, so obviously we could just, throw a rock and find a college to look at, but I just didn't know whether that was like something you recommend. It didn't seem like that was what you were recommending, but just sort of curious. Like they were like flying places to look at schools. So, which, anyway, that's what I'm wondering.
I'm happy to start and people can chime in. I don't think that that's necessary and I don't think that you are behind. And I absolutely understand how you would sort of say like, I don't even know where to start. And your child might feel the same way too. I don't think you need to go out of your way to do visits in the summer after sophomore year. As I said earlier, I think if you're in an area that is rich with a bunch of different schools and you have some time to walk around a few different campuses, really just to compare the campuses, not even the names and the programs or anything like that, that can be beneficial. It's always amazing to us how quickly a student that says to us, I don't really know what I want, as soon as they get on 2 or 3 campuses, even if they are not at schools that they're interested in applying to, they have such a better sense of what they want and don't want. It's almost immediate, right? So the idea of just getting on and exploring campuses is maybe a great idea if you have the time. But honestly, if you don't have that time, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. Most of our families will start visiting colleges on spring break of their junior year or summer of their junior year going into their senior year. They're older, they know a little bit more what they want. They've also been paired with a college counselor. So they also have an initial list. And so they've done a little bit of research. And so sometimes they are even in those first visits targeting a little bit more schools they might really be interested in applying to. So I would say general research if you happen to be in areas, but I don't think you have to go out of your way to create giant college tours.
And the other thing I'd add,
Thank you.
what I'd add real quick is like when you visit a school during the summer, you're most likely not going to see a lot of things too, because the colleges are shutting down during the summer, right? Some of the bigger universities are obviously 12-month, campuses, and there's always students there. The colleges that I used to work for, we'd be very busy during the summer, but it was summer camps and little kids and not college students. And so you'd see lots of people on the campuses that I worked for, but you would see, middle school kids and elementary school kids and high school kids, not college students. So that's the other piece about visiting now, especially as a sophomore. Visiting later as a junior, you're going to know that, but then it's also you're also much later in the process, like Emily said.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
Any other questions?
As people are thinking, or maybe thinking, one thing I'll also add, just sort of made me think when that question came through, the idea of sort of overachievers or really starting the process early. How much you talk about the process to your son or daughter is something to maybe think about as well as you go through it with them. It can become really overwhelming. And so one of the things that, a number of studies have shown, just sort of a tip from our office, is if you feel like you need to talk to your student a lot about the college process, it's just something that you feel like you need to do, trying to limit it to once a week, and really trying to schedule when that time is so your young person knows, okay, you know what, on Sunday night, it's time to talk about college, and that's okay. You're going to find they're more likely to engage because they don't have to worry calling you on a random Wednesday. You're going to turn it back to college counseling again, and they don't want to talk about that. Right. And so being mindful of how much you insert the process is also sort of important. And we tend to say, you know, try to limit it to once a week and try to limit it to less than an hour, right? Just really get all those questions or all those thoughts that you want to get out there in one space at one time. And then, you know, your relationship just remains the same the rest of the time. It's not always, oh my gosh, I'm going to call my mom. I don't want to call my mom or dad because they're just going to ask about college and I don't want to talk about it. So that's something else to think about.
Yeah, that's the one thing I would add, Joe, to your question about visits, which would be there's different types, right? I don't think there's much pressure in the sophomore year if you're somewhere, like Emily said, and you know, if you're doing your own drive-through campus visit, that's one kind of visit. Signing up formally for the info session and an official tour is a different type of visit. So depending on the student, you know, students may be fine this early saying, sure, I'll look out the car window at, you know, Holy Cross or driving to Worcester. Let's drive around Holy Cross's campus. That's fine. You can get, you know, some sort of idea. So that sort of, you know, sort of a tailoring with what Emily said. It's the read of the student and how they're feeling about it. Nothing is fine, but flybys are fine. Yeah.
We also just got another question in the chat. What is the average number of colleges Cushing students apply to? I can give you the average because I do the board reports and we do them a lot during the year. We have a very big range. So I will just sort of say that, but on average, about 9, on average, 8 to 9. We do have a wide range. We have folks that only apply to 1. We really do, right? They have an early decision school or a restrictive early action school. And they apply and they said, I'm going to wait to see if I get in there. And they do get in there and they're all done. Or a committed athlete that's already been pre-read and they're all done. And then we have a range on the upper side sometimes that is not something that the college office recommends. But, you know, I try to be transparent. Our high is about 30 and that is nothing that we would recommend. It's just not. You can't have done a whole lot of research. You can't have done a whole lot of legwork up front if you're applying to that many schools. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of applications to try to invest in and make really solid. And we don't think that is necessary, but we don't limit it. That's my long way of saying we don't limit it. We don't hold students' transcripts. We don't charge money after a certain number to send your transcripts. We don't do that. It is the student's decision ultimately how big their list is. The common application has a 20 school limit on it, but the average at Cushing is about 8 or 9. If anybody else wants to chime in on that as well. And there are cases that maybe it would be a little bit bigger. Somebody with financial aid, there's an example that might have a larger list, and it might be necessary, right? Because you're not quite sure what all the financial aid packages are going to look like. And the strategies that you have surrounding financial aid might expand that list a little bit, but it still wouldn't expand it to 30. That's just a choice of that student and family.
All right. We got time for maybe a last question or we're also happy to conclude and let you go on with your evenings. Sounds like that's what people want to do.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As Emily said, we will do some work with your students later in the spring, and we're happy also if you had a question you think of after the presentation, reach out to any of us. We're happy to help you out. Again, thanks for joining us and have a terrific evening.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everybody.